General Ashok Mehta, Dr. Felix Schmidt, Dr. Sarah Hayes, Ambassador Rakesh Sood, ladies and gentlemen, in general, I am not too sure as to whether my exit was a loss to the group or if at all it's been any gain to the government. But nonetheless, I thank you very much for inviting me to be part of the launch of this policy paper on Afghanistan, which of course, before I set out any further, allow me to caveat my remarks by saying that whatever I have to observe, I observe for myself and not for the government of India, because it would be extremely unfair and inappropriate for me to be binding the government of India in any manner to whatever observations I may have on the policy paper But to go back, well, Afghanistan has always been at the crossroads of history since times immemorial, and perhaps that's why, rightly so, it's been colloquially often referred to as the graveyard of empires. With Afghanistan, you can possibly go back to any point in time in history, but allow me to pick up the threads from possibly 1818, when Maharaja Ranjit Singh, who was then the ruler of the Punjab, defeated the Duranis and captured the Peshawar Valley. The battles of Attock, Multan, Shopia, Naushera, Peshawar, Jamrud, they all still resound in the collective conscience of the Punjab. By 1849, the Sikh Empire was gone. It was replaced by the British, and the British were then the East India Company, and between the this very animated debate about a forward policy or a more mercantile engagement. The Ludhiana school unfortunately won out, and therefore you had the Anglo-Afghan wars, and unlike the Sikhs, the British did not really come out on top. We came to the 20th century when the Third Anglo-Afghan War ended. You had Amanullah Khan, Muhammad Nadir Shah, Zahir Shah for a very long time, from 1933 to 1973. And then an assortment of arrangements between 73 and 80. And finally, the Soviets came. In 1989, the Soviets withdrew. Colonel General Boris Gromov was the last Soviet to walk across the Friendship Bridge. I don't think the Afghans really felt very friendly about that particular encounter, but be that as it may. It was replaced by the regime of President Najibullah, then the Taliban, and then the Americans. And now we are in 2013, and your paper begins by stating that the security environment in Afghanistan can be best described as a stalemate, both at the strategic and the tactical levels. Now, this raises a very obvious question: that is conflict a natural state of play in Afghanistan? And if that paradigm is correct, given that we have strategic interests in Afghanistan, would it still not be worth our while to really keep an arm's length from the situation? Because if you look at events as they have unfolded from 2001 onwards, it commenced as the war on terror. By 2003, thanks to Iraq, it became the forgotten war. In 2008, candidate Obama referred to it as the good war. You had then coin the counterinsurgency strategy, which has increasingly moved to counterterrorism plus. And a lot of people believe, of course I don't subscribe to that view personally, that increasingly it has started looking like a cut and run without making it look like an Amudarya moment. So, and this has very serious consequences because look at the psychological boost it will give the Mujahideen slash the Taliban, that in the last decade of the 20th century, or in the penultimate decade of the 20th century, they vanquished the mighty Soviet bear. And in the second decade of the 21st century, they have ensured that the American eagle also takes flight. And this has some very serious implications for the stability and the security of the region. Now, our strategic interests have been very well delineated by both Ambassador Rakesh Sood as well as General Mehta and the authors of this paper. Our principal political interest is to ensure that the nature of the Afghan state stays pluralistic, stays secular, represents the entire ethnic and demographic composition of what makes up Afghanistan. We do have a stake in ensuring, or at least in seeing that the elections in 2014, the political transition which Ambassador Sood referred to is free and fair, and then of course observing the whole reconciliation process where the Taliban. And our security interests obviously are to see that the kind of Afghanistan which existed between 1996 and 2001, that does not become the state of play. And God forbid if it were to ever become the state of play, then unlike December 1999, we do not need to really go shopping around for an introduction. Of course, the Afghan National Security Force needs to be further augmented, further strengthened, because given the numbers which are going around as to after 2014, what would be the force levels which the US would leave there, which varies from 6,000 to 25,000. If people have a stake in the stability of Afghanistan, obviously that is going to come out of strengthening the ANSAF to the level it is. We have concerns that Pakistan still believes that Afghanistan is its strategic depth. We have a difficulty with that entire doctrine because of the simple reason that we do not believe that any sovereign country can really be the strategic depth of anybody. China, which is increasing its presence in Afghanistan, is also something which will have to be watched very carefully. Economically, if peace prevails in the region, if the situation becomes tranquil, Afghanistan provides the land bridge to the Central Asian republics. As both Ambassador Sood and General Mehta pointed out, we need to protect and expand India's economic footprint, make Afghanistan or Afghan agriculture sustainable, because economic development in a country where a bulk of the population still depends upon agriculture for their livelihood, I think is the single most important impetus which the international community should give, and see if the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline can work out. Given that we are the only country with which Afghanistan entered into a strategic agreement, and that continues to hold the field. Going from here to 2014, I think we need to work to see that a security vacuum does not really develop in Afghanistan. We need to establish contact and vital contact with all key stakeholders in Afghanistan. And I entirely agree with what General Mehta said, and this is purely my personal view, not the view of the government of India, that we need to have Afghanistan-specific dialogue with Pakistan. I think that is something which is imperative. We need to also get Iran, the Stans, other regional stakeholders involved in the process of far more robust consultation to see that the handover or the handoff, when it takes place in 2014, does not degenerate into a situation which is not to anybody's liking. And the one observation which I would like to disagree with in the paper is that notwithstanding whether it is under a United Nations flag or any other flag, I don't think that there should be any Indian boots on the ground in Afghanistan. And the reason why I say that is because over the last 34 years of conflict, India has been able to retain its goodwill with the people of Afghanistan by not getting involved in what has turned out to be at different points in time, different dimensions of different conflicts playing themselves out simultaneously. And finally, I would just like to conclude by saying that the people of Afghanistan have seen immense tragedy. A child who was born in 1980, in 2013, he would be 33 years old. He's seen conflict as the only constant of his life. And I think the international community owes it to Afghanistan that any policy that we formulate, qua that country, must put the interests of the Afghans first and foremost, and that should be the guiding line. Thank you very much once again, General Mehta, for inviting me.